Hey, want to know what it's like when a shark bites off your leg? This is all about how I went out for a day trip. Not all of me came back again. I'm Amy. I'm 16, and if you're someone who doesn't like sharks, well, I'm afraid my story isn't going to make you feel any better about them. My story begins back when I had 2 legs, and also 2 houses. Since my mom and dad broke up, me and my younger sister Beth live in mom's house for 3 days a week, and dad's house for 4 days a week. Sound familiar? Sometimes it can be really annoying, like when you're thinking, is my homework at the other house? And mom and dad don't talk anymore, which can be really frustrating for me and Beth. Like, guys, you're the adults. Sort it out. Luckily, Beth didn't seem to notice it as much as she was too busy trying to take selfies. So one day, my dad texts us, bring some warm clothes on Saturday. We're going for a trip on the river. Mom was super annoying. She was like, what? What is he thinking? Out on the river? We've never discussed this. He is so irresponsible. He can't just take you out on the river whenever he wants. I said, Mom, relax. People go out on the river all the time. We'll be with Dad. It will be fine. To be fair to my mom, Beth is not a great swimmer, nor does she always focus. Then Dad sent another bombshell of a message. Just so you know, my friend Julia is going to come with us. Mom was livid about him being on a dangerous river with Julia, who he barely knows. But she had to let us go see Dad because they spent a lot of money in court and neither of them can afford to break the arrangements. When we got to Dad's, I got a message from Mom. She said, sorry for being frustrated that Dad wanted to take us out for a trip and that sometimes it was hard for her not to keep us safe. But she also said that I was not to let Beth go into the water under any circumstances. I showed my dad Mom's messages. I was really angry with them both for not communicating with each other. Beth is my little sister, and I love her, but it's not up to me to be responsible for her all the time. Just because they aren't speaking. Dad told me he would deal with Mom and everything would be okay. When we got to the boat, Dad said, girls, this is my friend Julia. Like, yeah, right, Dad. Friend? I didn't mind that my dad had a new girlfriend, especially one with a cool boat. Shame she said ahoy there, though. She was super cool until then. Then I realized that she actually lived on the boat. She had a tiny bed and fold-up chairs and tables and not much room to keep her things. And outside, the river was right there. Before we set off, Julia said that everyone who knows anything about boats never goes anywhere without a life jacket. They were bright orange and kind of uncomfortable. Beth's was a little bit small for her, and she was being all dramatic because she didn't want to wear it. I was really stressed out. What on earth would Mom do if she found out that Beth was gone out on the river without a life jacket? But thankfully, Julia found a jacket that fitted Beth perfectly. I was relieved. No, I didn't have to worry about Mom and Dad having another huge fight about us. The trip was so fun, but I'm guessing you want to know when the shark comes in. Hold on tight. You're going to need a bigger seat. So I asked to swim off the boat, but when I dipped my hand in, it was freezing. No way. I never got why ice baths became a trend. And Dad and Julia did one of those grown-up looks like, this is going really well. And then everything started to go wrong. Another boat pulled up beside us. Julia called out, ahoy there, Tom. I mean, do they really still say ahoy there? Anyway, Tom called ahoy there back, so I guess they do. But then shock, horror. He told us that some people down the river had reported seeing a shark. I was like, okay, we've all seen and learned from the movie. Let's get back to the shore. Annoyingly, Beth hadn't seen the movie and got excited about seeing a shark. Dad told me not to worry. The boat was bigger than the shark, and sharks didn't attack people like they do in the movies. Everything would have been absolutely fine, but even so, he looked at Julia and they both looked kind of concerned. Beth started dancing around saying, shark selfie! Everyone is going to be so jealous of me. And she leaned over the side of the boat. The thing is, she wasn't actually leaning over that far, but Mom and Dad had gotten me so wound up about the idea of anything happening to Beth that I panicked. I rushed towards her, and I moved so fast the boat tipped. I heard Julia shout, "Beth, get back!" Beth began to fall, so I grabbed her and pulled her into the middle of the boat. But then the worst thing happened. I slipped, lost my balance, and I fell right on top of the shark. I could feel its blubbery skin right underneath me. I slid off its back into the water. The shark must have thought I attacked it. It must have been so frightened. One second, it was swimming peacefully along. Next minute, it had a great big human sliding around on top of it. I'd be pretty annoyed if I was that shark. Dad said, "Amy, take my hand." And I swam towards him. The water was freezing, but I did the best I could, and I reached out to my dad. My fingers just about managed to touch his fingers when I felt the sudden sharp pain in my leg. Now, I don't know if you have ever been stung by a wasp, but at first it was like that, but 1,000 times worse. A sharp sting that went on, and I could feel the shark shaking and vibrating as it sank its gigantic teeth further and further into my leg, through the skin, through the flesh, through the muscles, through the bone. I found out later that "Ahoy there, Tom" hit the shark on the nose with his oar. Then Julia let off a flare, and he scared off the shark. And I couldn't believe it. Julia jumped in to get me out of the water while my dad was on the phone to call for help. Between them, Tom and Julia had sent the shark away and saved my life. Luckily for me, I was airlifted straight to hospital. I had lost a lot of blood in the water and nearly bled to death, and I was suffering from shock. I went straight into surgery, and the doctors tried their best to save my leg, but the power of the shark's jaws had crushed my bones. Later that night, Mom and Dad had to make a difficult decision. My leg was so badly injured that trying to save it would put my life in danger. My leg needed to be amputated. For the first time in years, they managed not to argue, and I went back into surgery. Learning to walk again was really hard and took a long time. I was in hospital for weeks and missed tons of school, but I did get to be in the local paper. There aren't many sharks that swim in fresh water, especially not 600 miles away from the sea. So meeting a 500-pound, 7-foot-long adult bull shark was pretty unlucky. The people from the news asked me if I hated sharks now, but actually I don't. It's not the shark's fault. I fell right on top of it. Shark attacks on humans are incredibly rare, and the shark wasn't trying to eat me. Learning to live without one leg has been tough, but it's not the end of the world. And some good things came out of our trip on the river. Mom and Dad realized that the things they had been fighting over weren't as important as they thought, and started to talk again. Beth told Mom how Julia had thought about our safety first and how she had jumped in to save my life. And would you believe it? Mom met Tom and they became friends. Grown-ups, we know you're all dating. And guess what? Tom also lived on a boat, so now instead of living between two houses, we live between two boats. The day trip on the river has changed my life forever, but I'm learning how to adapt. And I'm thankful the shark didn't just get its jaws around more of me. And always remember, when someone sees a shark, don't go into the water. Comment, "We love Ahoy there, Tom," if you want to find out how Mom and Tom's friendship took a spooky turn.
Hi, I'm Katerina. I'm 16. I'm going to tell you a story about something super scary that happened to me. Are you scared of the dark? You will be. So, both my parents are archaeologists. Sounds amazing, right? Action. Adventure. Gold treasure. Nope. They both work in a university and read a lot of books. Dad is obsessed with old pots. Mom is all about soil. That's right, soil, like dirt. Oh, and before you ask, no, they don't dig up dinosaurs. Don't ask about dinosaurs. They get asked that a lot. But having archaeologists for parents isn't all bad. We get to travel a lot. But wherever we go, Mom and Dad do one thing: dig holes. They dig holes in the desert. They dig holes in forests. They dig holes in the mountains. They dig holes in the jungle. No matter where we are in the world, Mom and Dad just want to know what's under the ground. Mom and Dad's travel photos are, well, not for everyone. Mine, on the other hand, I love taking pictures. My camera is my most treasured possession. Sometimes I wish Mom and Dad would look up from their holes in the ground. They'd realize what amazing experiences they're missing. But little did I know that our trip to the Amazon rainforest would end up a really scary experience. Mom and Dad were invited to help on a research dig searching for an ancient temple. Dad was excited. Mom was excited. I was so excited. The most important rule was to stay close to the dig and the camp, because it is super easy to get lost. And if you get lost, no one will ever find you. And the wild jaguars get pretty hungry. It was so remote, and I couldn't even use my phone. One night, we were sitting round the campfire. The sunset looked so pretty. I wanted to take a picture, but I couldn't find my camera. I turned my tent upside down looking for it, but I couldn't find it anywhere. I was so upset. My camera was everything to me. Mom and Dad were just focused on their work and didn't seem to take it at all seriously. Mom told me to look in my bag. I had already looked there. Dad told me to look in my sleeping bag. I had already looked there. I was frustrated that they didn't help me look. I tried to remember the last picture I had taken. Then I remembered. I was photographing this amazing butterfly when Lewis, the head archaeologist, handed me a water bottle, and I put the camera down on a tree stump. I had left my camera at the dig site. It was getting dark, but I thought I would just have time to run to the site, grab my camera, and return to camp. I should have told Mom and Dad where I was going. Of course I should, but I was angry at them for not helping me look for my camera. Sure enough, my beloved camera was exactly where I left it. I was so relieved. I scooped it up, and just then I heard a sound in the trees. I hoped it was something cute and cuddly, but then I remembered. The hungry jaguars. I didn't wait to find out what it was. I crawled backwards super slowly, and there are no prizes for guessing what was behind me. Yep, a gigantic hole in the ground. Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Dad. Thankfully, it wasn't deep enough for me to be really hurt. I stood up, looked around. The earth at the one side of the hole trembled, and then it fell away to reveal an enormous carved door. And I know what you're thinking. Katerina, no one would be crazy enough to walk through an ancient door, in the dark, in the middle of the rainforest, on their own. And you're right. I'm not at all that crazy. Just then, the ground underneath me shook, and I fell through some kind of trapdoor into an ancient tomb. Lucky, my camera had a light on it. I shone it around the enormous room. It was astonishing to think this amazing tomb had been down here this whole time, and I was the first person to see these beautiful carvings for hundreds and hundreds of years. But also, it was cold, and it smelled bad, and I realized that Mom and Dad would be worried about me. I thought about what could be down here with me. Spiders. Snakes. I took my mind off it by looking at the tomb in more detail. All around me were beautiful objects. Carved cups and bowls, beautiful statues. I reached out and picked one of them up. It was covered in dust. I rubbed it carefully, and then... it was made of gold! My parents are archaeologists, but I was the one who had found treasure. But I was still trapped in an ancient tomb. I had to find a way out. Just then, I felt the wind on my face. Perhaps there was another way out. I crept carefully down a long passageway. I felt something in my hair. Ew! I thought it must be spiders, but when I looked up, it was the roots of the rainforest coming down into the passageway. I felt the wind again and kept going. Then all of a sudden, I could see light up ahead. It must be the light of our camp. But before I could get to it, I saw that the path below my feet had fallen away and there was a deep chasm. I was still trapped. Just then, I heard people calling my name. Katerina! Called Mom's voice. Katerina! Called Dad's voice. I called back, "Mom, Dad, I'm down here!" But my voice echoed back at me from the stone walls of the tomb. How could I have been so stupid as to run off to find my camera without letting them know where I was going? Up ahead, I could see a tiny slither of light coming through the ceiling. It was so low that if I got to it, I was sure I'd be able to get out of the tomb. I reached up and tugged at one of the roots above my head to see if it would take my weight. But then I stopped myself. If running off had been dumb, surely trying to get across the chasm was even dumber. But then I heard a noise behind me. There was definitely something in here with me. I grabbed the tree roots one after the other, swinging myself across the empty chasm. I sprinted towards the light, but when I got closer, I could see the hole was tiny. There's no way I could get through. I called out, "Mom! Dad, I'm down here! Help!" I saw Mom and Dad's feet running towards me. "Katerina, what are you doing down there?" Dad sounded worried. "Dad, there's no time. There's something down there with me." Luckily for me, if there's one thing my parents can do really, really fast, it's dig. I heard something move in the dark. Something was coming closer and closer. Could my parents dig fast enough to get me out before it caught me? Yes, they could. I had been trapped in a tomb with a hungry jaguar. So that's how I got trapped in an ancient tomb, and how I got out again. Mom and Dad were kind of furious, but then they saw the jaguar and they were just glad I was okay. Plus, they absolutely loved the gifts I brought back up for them. So, am I rich now I discovered gold treasure? Nope. Lewis and his team are busy excavating the tomb to learn all we can about the ancient people who lived and died here. Am I going to tell you exactly where this tomb was? Nope. No matter how many comments you leave below this video. And you'll only get hunted by Hungry Jaguar if you do try to find it. But Mom and Dad were so scared that they nearly lost me that for once I managed to get them look up from digging holes and see how amazing this place is.
Want to know how I became a detective and solved a real-life mystery? And I got much closer to my sister. Well, I had the most exciting summer ever of my life, and I just have to tell you about it. Hi, I'm Evie, and I'm 14. So, let's start with my older sister, Grace. Think chalk and cheese, cat and dog. We were total opposites and tried to stay out of each other's way as much as possible. We argued all the time. But it all changed one day when our parents sat us down and told us that they wanted to go away together for a couple of weeks. They wanted to leave us in charge of looking after the horses on the farm. If we made it work, we would be allowed to go trekking with our ponies around the hills with a professional guide. Something we both wanted to do for ages. Mom said she hoped that this also meant that we might stop our constant arguing and find a way to get along with each other. We wouldn't be completely alone, as Mom's sister, Aunt Holly, would be staying with us. She'd have to work, that's why we were in charge of the animals. Well, that, and she's allergic to horses. Grace and I had our own ponies. Mom had her prized racing horse, Spirit, which we sometimes groomed but never rode. Spirit was a beautiful, sweet-natured horse. Mom said that when she goes away, we needed to make sure Spirit is exercised well, as she was used to a hard training regimen. In the summer, the horses normally just stayed on the pasture by the stream right behind the house, so Grace and I would only need to make sure they had food and water. Our parents soon left for their vacation, and Grace and I promised not to argue. But we had disagreement after disagreement. I wanted to weigh the food to the exact amount, but Grace said she'd just seen Mom throw it in. I wanted to monitor the amount of carrots the horses ate, but Grace thought it'd be funny if they turned orange. We didn't really talk or even look at each other at all. Finally, Aunt Holly turned up, but also invited her new boyfriend, Pete. He seemed okay, but Grace thought he was shifty, as he was always up early looking around the place and writing things in a notebook. Aunt Holly would give us errands when we weren't outside looking after the animals, like go to the post office or the grocery shop. One time, Grace wanted to check out where Pete lived, and I had to begrudgingly go with her. And his house looked normal to me. Although we didn't have to go to school, thanks to the holidays, we had our hands full taking care of the horses. We had to keep the house and farm in order and prepare food for ourselves, the dogs, and cats. For one brief moment, Grace and I agreed that Aunt Holly had not been helpful at all. But then Grace said there was something strange about Pete, and we fell out again. As I said, he and Aunt Holly probably just wanted to settle in and will properly help tomorrow. But the next day, Aunt Holly called to say that she was going to spend the next few days at Pete's house. She said we were responsible enough to be on our own, and other girls our age would kill to be in our position. She said if we didn't tell Mom and Dad, we could do whatever we wanted. Have friends over, have a party. Well, I was just about to tell her no way, and that I was going to call Mom when Grace hung up the phone. Grace asked what was wrong with me. This was our chance to be in an adult-free house. She said I should enjoy it rather than looking for problems. Early in the morning, I could hear the horses in the pasture were unsettled. I went out, and my pony Sundance was pacing back and forth in front of the gate. What had got him riled up? I soon realized Spirit was missing. I searched the pasture and the banks of the stream, but Spirit was gone. I shouted, "Grace!" in a panic. Thankfully, she was calm and reassuring. She said the fence had not been damaged, which was strange. Someone knew how to unlock the gate. We called Aunt Holly and told her we were going to the police. She was sorry she wasn't with us. She said she'd take care of the police as we'd been through enough. She said we didn't need to worry our parents with it. Spirit would turn up soon. She would call back and let us know what they said. Grace and I waited for Aunt Holly to call. We both knew exactly what Spirit meant to our mom, and we waited and waited. Grace thought it was strange that the police hadn't turned up yet to get evidence and search the place and question us. And don't faint, but I agreed. We decided to search for clues ourselves. We soon found tire tracks, too big for a car. Then I noticed some rusty nails on the path. Grace was taking selfies, and I said, now is not the time. But then she spotted some red paint by the fence opening. Grace got serious and took lots of photos of everything for evidence. The tire tracks, nails, red paint. We felt like real detectives from TV. Grace wanted to check out Pete's house, but I said it might be dangerous. Grace said we had to get Spirit back as she might be in danger. We hid our bikes and snuck into Pete's place and looked around. And we couldn't believe it! Grace found a red truck in a garage, the exact color of the paint on our fence. I saw rusty nails embedded in the wheels, just like the ones from our pasture. Then we heard a neigh. A wonderful, familiar neigh! Spirit! And standing in an enclosed paddock, there she was. Well, I was furious and barged straight into the house to confront Pete. Grace right at my side. But he wasn't there. Aunt Holly called and said the police had found Spirit and she was okay. I was about to get mad with her when Grace told her, "Thanks for letting us know," and hung up. We slowly realized there were no police. Aunt Holly had lied to us. We agreed there was only one thing to do. Steal Spirit back. Grace and I led Spirit on a halter out of the paddock, through the pasture, and back home. Grace and I hugged when she was safe and back in her paddock. We called the police. Then, Grace had the super cool idea to text Aunt Holly to say Spirit was back at home and the police were with us. Thanks for her help. It wasn't long before Aunt Holly showed up, shocked to see the police. We asked if she knew Pete stole Spirit, and the police said that they'd prefer to ask the questions. She said she didn't know and couldn't believe Pete would betray her like that. Then Grace noticed Aunt Holly's wrist was red, and I noticed she was scratching it. She had a rash, and we all knew about her allergic reaction to horses. Well, Aunt Holly went as red as Pete's van. I said, "How could you do that to Mom?" Aunt Holly started crying and confessed everything. She wanted to secretly take Spirit to breed her with a sought-after stud and return her after a few days. Aunt Holly wanted us to believe that the police had found her. She had been jealous of her sister Sarah, our mom, as she seemed to have everything. She was always a better writer, always had more success and luck. And she even had an amazing family. It turns out Aunt Holly hated her boring life. She was just a petty, jealous sister and a thief. She was trying to make herself feel better by exploiting others. When my parents returned, they were amazed how we handled the Spirit and Aunt Holly situation. We got to go on our pony trek, and it was amazing. We were glad that Aunt Holly confessed and said she wanted to make it up to Mom at some point. We did get in a bit of trouble, as Mom reminded us how lucky we were and how dangerous our behavior could have been if we were dealing with real criminals. But she also admitted it was great to see Grace and I working together for a change. So, what about you? Have you ever had a wild adventure or had to play detective like Grace and me? Do share your story with me in the comments. I'd love to hear about them.